This is Things Police See, First-Hand Accounts, with your host, Steve Gould.
Welcome to the podcast that interviews active and retired police officers about their most intense, bizarre, and sometimes humorous moments on the job. I am, in fact, Steve Gould. Thank you for being here. Thank you for finding the podcast and checking it out. Thank you for coming back. A lot of people binge listening, which I like and I appreciate. So thank you to everybody. Thank you for the ratings and reviewing that is going on. Over 1K on Apple Podcasts, which was my goal. But you know what looks even better than 1K is 1.1. So we're getting close to that as well. Just got back from Cape Cod. I live in Massachusetts and I have family on the Cape. Man, it's a great place to visit. And boy, did I eat bad. It was in a really good way with intermittent fasting and doing well. In the last 3 days, I just ate like a pig and I feel great. No, I feel terrible. That's who I am. I'm a little piggy. I'm a little ginger piggy, and when I get in the grain room, I can't stop eating. So I'm back home, back on the rails. Gonna punish myself and not eat for at least like 18 hours. That's the plan, anyways, guys. Thank you also for all the recent Patreon supporters. It's so awesome. At the end of the month, when I have a bunch of bills coming in, I have to pay for the show stuff, and I have this extra money come in that I often forget about, and it helps take care of all that, because to do the show, to produce the show, to edit it, to schedule, to do the interviews, all those things, I can't take as much overtime or road work or things like that I need to support my household. So the Patreon is really a huge benefit. So if you really, really love the show, that's a place to support. The link is in the show notes. If you can't, or it's not in the budget, I totally understand. The show will remain free always, so the great men and women of law enforcement can get the maximum amount of people hearing just the totally insane stories that they live on the job. That's the whole point of the podcast, is to hear, to be like a fly in the wall in a room with two cops talking about the crazy calls they've been on. This episode will be no different. I have an active copper I'm about to bring on. He's from the great state of Florida. Since he is active, we're just going to go with the first name of Charlie. He's also the owner and creator of the great 10-8 memes on Instagram, so follow him there. And also the host of the 10-8 podcast. He's got 6.5 years in law enforcement, 2 years dispatch. So without further ado, let me bring on the great Charlie. Charlie, welcome to the show, brother.
Hey, man, how are you?
I'm doing great. With an abundance of caution for the YouTube watchers, we have blurred Charlie's face out, which is a feature I've never used, but actually looks pretty cool. Feel like we're doing like unsolved mysteries.
Do not adjust your screens, right?
Right. Exactly.
Actually, just to clarify, I was active 6.5 as a cop, and now I'm a 2-year dispatcher at another agency. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Very cool. Do you ever listen to Com Center, Drew Breezy?
Yep. Actually, that's funny because we've been talking since Com Center came out about me getting on the show, and it's just a scheduling thing. We just haven't done it yet. They've been on my show once. I love those guys. Yeah,
they're great, man. I was kind of on the fence when it first came out. I was like, I don't know if a show about dispatch. I mean, dispatchers they're involved in crazy stuff, but I wasn't sure like how it would go. And it's just gotten better, man. Free plug for those guys, because it is.
Yeah, and their personalities carry it. So that's, I think, the best part about it is those two guys. Like, if you got certain people and certain dispatchers on that show or doing the exact same thing, it would fall very dry and very flat. But those guys are just amazing.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And that is a wicked hard job. When I was my last agency, I would be OIC sometimes as patrol. Like if the sergeant wasn't on, I would be senior patrol and I would be in charge of the shift. And they sent me to 911 certification school so that I could give dispatch a break. And man, I was sweating bullets when they went on break. I was like, if you hear that, because the 911 had a certain ringer. And I was like, please, if you hear the 911 go, please just come up here. I'll
just come back.
Just do the call, especially if it's for the fire department, because they start calling all these boxes and I'm just completely lost. So they knew I was a big baby about it and they took care of me, thank goodness, because it was almost, I'd rather go to the call than have to like triage all these services at the same time and somehow show compassion and dictate CPR to someone to do on their loved one. It's like, dude, it's a lot.
Yeah, so my center is just police dispatch, but we do call taking, dispatching, and we run the teletype machine. And at any one moment, you could do all three at the same time. Plus, dealing with road requests and things like that. And there's times when an officer will come in, whether they're just, chatting or they're there for business, and they run out the room because it gets like chaotic. And they've actually made it part of the field training process that the trainees are supposed to sit in the dispatch room for at least like 8 hours, but they usually don't even last that long. But they're like, what's going on here? Like, it's like our job is a running anxiety attack. Like, you never know what's going to go on. And it's crazy. And, coming from the road to dispatch, obviously I had preconceived notions of what dispatch was. And,
Sure.
and the jokes of like, oh, they just sit with their feet up. They got TV on. And then you realize that, no, I mean, it's on, and maybe their feet are up for like a second during like a moment of downtime, but it gets crazy, especially where I work from like 10 a.m. to like 2 a.m. It just doesn't stop. And because of, nationwide staffing shortages on the road, it's busy, and you got all these calls pending, and it's like, we need more units. Can I make one up? I don't know. It's crazy.
Yeah, I know one I always feel bad for dispatch is that shift change and there's something going on. The other night where I worked, there was a car chase with canines deployed, looking for the operators and the passengers who fled from on a highway. Right in the middle of it, it went to 11 o'clock. And then the new crew comes on and you're like, man, I feel bad. You walk in the room to start your day and you're like, hey, we have this going on. These are the units that are there. This is what they said so far. This is what we've gotten started. That is so gross to me to be like, it's all because it's not, but it's like someone's just handing you their horrible mess. And
for sure. There's been many times I go in at 6 p.m. and there's times I come in for shift change and I see the lights and sirens leaving the station. I'm like, nope, I want to turn around right now. I don't know where they're going to. I don't want to go there. 2 weeks ago, so I'm actually working tonight, but 2 weeks ago I went in for my shift and I had the weekend off, and I got to work early, which is kind of like earlier than usual. And I'm just sitting in my car and just, chilling, whatever. And it starts downpouring. Florida,
oh yeah, it's common there.
Yeah. And this one was worse than usual. I was like, God dang it. And I'm trying to wait the storm out. And I'm looking at the clock like, oh man, I got to go clock in. And I'm like, all right, whatever. And I run to the door, and we were having an issue with our buzzer system. So that didn't work. I had to go to a different door. So I finally get into the dispatch center, and I am soaked from head to toe. I'm so miserable. And I know I got to be there for 12 hours. And so I'm just grumpy, like grumpier than I was because it's a Monday. Right. And I look on the screen. They're working an active Alzheimer's patient missing. They're working an active 4-car pileup on the highway. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, this day cannot get any worse. And luckily, like the first call I pick up, because, the first call I pick up was a guy that found the Alzheimer's patient. I was like, oh, and then the next call was the Florida Highway Patrol calling, and they're like, hey, we're going to handle the crash. I'm like, oh my God, the skies are literally clearing up. So
thank you.
Yeah. But so many times they're like, hey, you do, it's your problem now. So tag, you're it.
Oh yeah. They can't wait to go home, I'm sure. See you later.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. That's like our dispatch center. If we have I work in the hill towns of Western Mass, and storms will come through and they will knock down all the trees and the telephones and all that other stuff. And then, normal police stuff happens in between that. And you just know, I'm on like a county board. You just know, like, if you're going to do a motor vehicle stop, you're going silent. You're not calling any motor vehicle stops. There are certain people during these kind of melees that will be like, yeah, can I get a warrant check on blah, 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 blah. And everybody's like, what are you doing?
Yeah. We've got a unit. One of our zones is like mostly unincorporated right now. Like, it's building up right now, but per directive, we have to have one unit in that area because it's quite a bit of drive from city center. And so he's always there, but he's got nothing to do. Like, when all this stuff is going on, he's got nothing to do. Right now, it's just old people and cow farms. But
sounds like my kind of gig.
Yeah. Right. And so we're, city's on fire. And he's like, yeah, can you copy a traffic stop? I'm like, dude, really? You just heard 5 different requests. Can you like give me a second? And this most recent rotation, it's been my dispatch supervisor's husband. And we both like me, my partner, we all like stared at our supervisor like, did he really just do that? Like he should know better of all people because he's married to you. And she's like, I'll text him. I'll figure out what's going on.
That's awesome. Yeah, that piling on is brutal.
Yeah.
I try to. Do they let you guys go? Do they allow silent motor vehicle stops there? Or do you have to at least initially call it out?
No, yeah, no, that you need to air it, at least the initial call. And that's, I mean, for more officer safety than anything else. But then they're supposed to do everything else by themselves, like, do the wants warrant check and whatever.
Backfill the plates and all that.
Yeah, and if they're like they'll only if they're on a traffic stop, they'll typically only have dispatch review the want warrant check if they're unsure if it's or if there is a warrant at all.
Just to confirm
and
it.
Yeah, pretty much. So typically, like, or if they ask for backup, then they've got something better than just grandma speeding a little bit. But yeah, for the most part, they can't go silent. And from my experience on the road, I actually prefer that, even though it's annoying when we're busy, I prefer them to air it, just to negate any kind of wait a second, where is he? What at least I know that he's out there.
Yeah, absolutely. What made you want to switch to dispatch?
So I was working for one agency, and I was already in the process to come to where I work now as a patrol officer. And during the process, one of my buddies pulled a car. Actually, he didn't pull a car over, but he was investigating a call, and he got shot. He got shot in the head, and so he ended up passing away from that. And then I moved, started the new agency, and I'm in training for the police officer gig. And another buddy, the first one that was on scene for that call, he took his life.
Oh my gosh.
And at that moment, I was like, you know what? The juice ain't worth the squeeze no more. I was done, like, completely. And my chief, like, I was only working there for a week or a month at that point, and he was like, listen, we already vetted you. We know you're good. We want you to work here. What if I reassign you? Will you stay? I'm like, okay, yeah, sure. And he's like, well, I've got openings in records, crime scene, which I used to do, and dispatch. How about I put you in dispatch? The only caveat is you cannot quit. He's like, I will, we'll pay you to do dispatch training, whatever. You just can't quit. Just give it a chance. And I was like, all right, fine. And so here we are.
Sounds like a great boss, man.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've said that, like in such a time of despair for me personally, and I was dealing with personal stuff as well. And for him to like see value in me, and obviously he spent all that money to vet me and everything, and to not just show me the door, which he could have. Like I was only there a month. He has no idea my work ethic, how I'm going to work out in the agency. But for him to like just be like, hey, stick with me, just don't quit, and I'll take care of you. And he's been great ever since too. So
that's awesome, man. Yeah, that's what good leaders need to do. When you spot talent, you got to try to hold on to them, especially now in law enforcement. It's like it's like heartbreaking, just nationally where I work, everywhere. You just constantly see these openings that just they're just either not getting the applicants, or they're going through the age old, like, do we lower the standards? Because we need, when you fight with the city or town to get more cops, and then you can't fill the seats. Now they want to take that. They're not going to keep appropriating that money for a spot,
right?
If you can't get somebody. So it's like, where do we go from here? So good on him, man, for recognizing you're an asset and just keeping you in the game.
Yeah, absolutely. And I since being there, actually, I think today is 2 years. I think that today is 2 years of being there.
Oh, congrats.
Yeah. They've added many officers and a couple dispatchers and everything. And I mean, he can also see when like you are not a good fit and here's the door. So I mean, he's not just accepting everybody that walks in, which made me feel even better. It's like, okay, it's not just because he needs people, it's because he obviously appreciates what he has or whatever. Not saying that I'm like, LeBron James of police work or anything, or some, some high paid whatever. But I just appreciate that more and more. And the thing with leadership is like, because of that, I'm willing to do so much more for him now. Like, he
Right.
took a gamble on me, then, and I've had sergeants like that when I was on the road. Like, I had sergeants who were absolutely terrible, and I wouldn't, go to a barking dog complaint for them. But then I've got other sergeants who, you asked me to take this crazy crash, and I'm supposed to go off the clock in 20 minutes. Yeah, I'll take it because it's you. And
Right.
that's how I've always felt about leadership. Like, I'll respect you because of your position, but when I respect you because of your position and because of the person you are, totally different ballgame.
Yeah, that's so true, isn't it? Yeah, because I try I try to look back on when I have supervising duties. I'm a sergeant now, and I'll very small place, but whenever I have to do something or have somebody do something or talk to them about something, I always look back at the sergeants that I admired and like, that's the model. Let's go with that rather than we've all had different kinds of supervisors. There's a few boilerplate sergeants. The sergeant that is close to retirement does not care. There's the micromanager who's like a newer sergeant maybe, who shows up at all your stops and gives you suggestions on everything, and you're like, okay, let me have my own discretion, please. And then there's the cool sergeant who like didn't forget what it was like and is like just there for support. If you need something, maybe has a recommendation, and if he has a recommendation, you're like, okay, I should probably go with that recommendation because he is who he is, so
right. Yeah. There's one specific sergeant who kind of followed me for the first couple of years of my career, and it got to the point where he trusted me so much on calls, he would show up literally just so we could bullshit afterwards. Like, that was all he could, like, he would show
right.
up and I'd be like, hey, Sarge, what do you think? He goes, I don't even know. I don't even know what's going on. Like, just like, this is your show, do your thing. And then the call ends and he's like, did you catch the game last night? And like, we'll talk about baseball. We'll talk about whatever we were talking about moments before. And I remember at that point in my career, I was only like 3 years on, but I was like one of the senior guys on my squad that talks about retention. Right. And, and he's like, and this call came out in my zone in my zone. And I was about to key up. He goes, what are you doing? I was like, it's my zone. And I was like the senior guy in that zone. I was supposed to be the backup unit. And he goes, no. You got a new guy. He needs practice. He can handle that call. I'm like, okay. Because he got it. He remembered what it was like humping calls and all that stuff. And he, and he didn't just do that for me. He did that for everybody. He always took care of people, or he'd be like, I remember one point, me and my buddy, we were meeting up after making a stop or whatever, and he called him and he was like, hey man, what are you doing? And he's like, nothing. He goes, it's midnight. You got stuff to do in the morning. Why don't you go home? And just send him home. It was our Friday, and just sent him home early because it's just stuff that he, paid attention to. And while I had other good sergeants, none would compare to him. They'd have to try really hard to compare to him.
Yeah. I know exactly what you're saying. I worked for a guy like that once who would we had a highway going through town, and I'd been to a crash and we'd go to another crash and he'd be like, I'll take this one. You just have one. Mm-hmm. And I was like, okay, great. I'll direct traffic.
I was brought up for this squad. This wasn't my first squad, but I was brought up by one of the senior guys on that squad and was like, listen, if the sergeant calls out for something, you go back him up. It doesn't matter what you're doing, clear it and go. He's like, the lieutenant hates when people don't do that. So still to this day, like when our sergeant called out for something and I'm in dispatch, I'm like, why is no one backing him up? Anyway, sergeant called out. He was out with a trespasser or whatever. And so I roll up to him, and it's this homeless guy that he had a beef with. Like, back when he was working street narcotics, he always had a beef with this guy. Funny story about that. And he hooked him up for trespassing or whatever it was. And I was like, hey, Sarge, you want me, he's like, hey, I just need you to transport. I was like, I'll transport. You want me to write it to you? He goes, no, I got this one. I catch it, I clean it. And I'm thinking of how many sergeants don't do that, right? Like, there was one, I was working overtime for an old sergeant that I had years prior. And he caught a DUI, and I was on overtime. And he's like, hey, can you work this? I'm like, are you really? you found this during bar closing. What did you think was going to happen? So I took it. Surprisingly enough, I took it,
Right. What are you going to do? Charlie, can we go back to a young officer, Charlie? And can you tell us about the first hot call that you handled, or call that you perceived as hot as a young officer?
When I woke up this morning, I was thinking about it because, so I did field training twice. I liked it so much I did it twice. Actually, I was not good at it the first time, so I had to do it a second time. And but I started out pretty good. Like when I got out of the academy, got out of our department academy, we had like two. Then hit the road. I was told that I was riding with Vampira herself, just the worst, the meanest. We had a really mean FTO. This was supposed to be part two. Like she was the younger version. So the whole
Cool.
time yeah. And I'm like, I only knew her name. I didn't know anything about her at this point. And she's like my age, maybe like a year older or so. And I was like, you sure? Like, I feel like I can get along with this person. And so she was kind of cold in the beginning. And I remember we got a call. It was one of our like undercover units was in pursuit of something. She goes, "You're not driving. Get in the passenger seat." And we, whatever. So later, actually, this might have been before that. My neighbor's obviously cutting grass. I don't know if you can hear that. My bad.
No worries.
Anyway, um, so I want to say it was one of the first nights she let me drive, and we got a call of a burglary in progress to a house right around the corner from where we were. And she's like, "Let's go." So I pop it in, and as we're driving and like we're slow rolling because I'm trying to see whatever, she's like, "That's the guy as described." I was like, "Oh, perfect!" And I like yanked the wheel, cut in front of him, and we jump out of the car. She like throws him on the hood, and I didn't put the car in park. I was so excited about getting to the bad
Yeah.
guy and all that like, but it was just a slight like roll or whatever, and the guy's on the hood. He goes, "Hold on a second, the car's moving, and I'm like, "Oh shit!" And so I pop it in park and whatever, and then so that was probably that was the first time, and
Yeah.
I remember at the end of that call, it wasn't a burglary in progress. We couldn't even dictate vandalism because the guy kicked the door. The guy kicked somebody's door, but it didn't leave permanent damage to it. He didn't actually force entry into the house. He was just like some drunk guy that kicked the door.
Right.
And so we literally had to let him go. To think that I almost accidentally ran over this guy that we didn't even have criminal charges on. And when I
Yeah.
say run over, I mean it was a parked car, just it was not moving, or it was just moving a little bit. But yeah, so I was thinking about this morning. I was like, man, that was my first hot call. That's terrible.
Dude, I've done that. I have done that. Started to get out of the car and it was still in drive. That is like, you reach back over real quick and pop it in. You're like, oh my gosh, that would have been a disaster.
Part two of that story, a month or two later, I'm with another FTO. And so the first car I was ever in was in a Chevy Impala, like a 2013 maybe. And like it had a key fob that I wasn't allowed to have. So the FTO always had it. So I didn't have the muscle memory to lock the car. Second car I was in for this story was a old Crown Vic. I don't even know what year, and I always got yelled at for not locking the door. So I had to keep whatever. So every single car, like to the point where my FTO, who was like salt of the earth, old guy, so much knowledge, but he would fuck with me about it. And I don't know if I can curse. I apologize.
No, it's fine, brother.
Okay. So he would mess with me about it. And like one time I was taking a burglary report, he goes, "Hey," he would call me on the radio. He goes, "Where's the car?" And so like I go out and I'm like, I parked it right here. And one of his other partners like moved it around the block or whatever. So that's just what he would do. Right. So we're just driving around. And at this point, my mind is like different shifts or whatever. My mind's just kind of going about different things to the point where like I was sitting at a stoplight or a stop sign waiting for it to turn green. He's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Oh, my bad. I was waiting for traffic. There was no traffic, whatever."
Right.
And so, but I'm quick on my feet. I was like, "No, I saw these kids over here and school's in session. I want to know why there's kids." Like that, to my credit, I was like, "That's thinking on your feet right there." But anyway,
Right.
so he's like, "All right, let's go talk to him." So we turn around, get out of the car, and it's two like 12-year-olds, very young, and he's standing at the front of the car. I'm standing at the front seat, the driver door. Both doors closed, and I locked the car this time. And so I'm getting names, and I'm like looking at my notepad, writing it down, and out of my corner of my eye, I think I see the car moving. And I look, I'm like, no, it must just be the way I was standing. So I keep going and I'm writing, and he goes, "Hey, did you put the car in park? This is a different," and I'm like, "I think I did." He goes, "Well, it's moving." So he like pushes the kid out of the way. He goes to the driver's or the passenger side and it's locked. And I'm like, "Well, at least I locked the car this time." So he's like, "Shut up." He gets in, he puts it in park. And I mean, it was nothing happened with that time either, but it was just like, oh God, like,
That's funny,
and I
dude.
think I honestly, and because I keep trying to figure out how, because it was such a subtle move, like it was even more subtle than the previous story,
Right.
that I'm like, I must have like put it in park and it didn't go all the way and it must have slipped down or whatever because it was an old Crown Vic. But it was just, I was like, good God. And then he's like, you want to, you need to take a break. You kind of, you're kind of a little shaky here today. But I ended up, when I had to do FTO the second time, I rode with this guy, and he even like, so when I left FTO the first time for personal reasons, and then came back, he would always give me a hard time when I was like in part time. Basically, when you're part time at my old agency, you worked prisoner transport, the front desk, stuff like that.
Right.
And he would always give me a hard time about something. Just he was just a sarcastic, salty guy. And when I went back through training, and I was with my first trainer the second time around, he was always just talking, getting under my skin. And then, but he was a really nice guy in the car, which I didn't like about him, but that's fine. And when I'm with him the second time, which is a year later, he would always log into the computer under his email and everything. He goes, "Hey, find this in the email," and I did, but I like had to use my. I was looking for my name in his email, and I just happened to see in his inbox him talking to the FTO coordinator, complaining about getting me again. He's like, "Oh, why do you hate me? Why do I have to get this kid again? Whatever."
Oh no.
And I saw this, and I never addressed it to him. And I'm just like, all right, you think like if you have such a problem with me, I'm going to be the best trainee to ever sit in your car. And after that moment, our FTO DOR scale was 1 to 5. I got 4s and 5s the rest of the training cycle.
Nice.
I'm like, yeah. I was like, I'm gonna make you eat your words. And he even said many times, he's like, I didn't know you had this ability, like whatever. And then as I moved on in my career, and he moved on, obviously, he got stepped over for sergeant, and they put him in cyber crimes division. And then when I worked crime scene and narcotics, we ended up kind of working together a bunch. And like only then did I really get his respect, and we would work side by side on certain things. But it was just like I always like whenever I was working with him, I was like, I'm gonna make you eat your words. Like I don't know. That's just me. Like if there's a villain in the story, I'm gonna go all the way with it.
Yeah, hell yeah. Use it to your advantage, like the fire under your ass, right?
Absolutely, and it worked. So I mean, good for him. I know he didn't do that on purpose. Like
That
I don't think he meant for me to see that email, but
that must have hurt a little bit. I would be like, oh man, that
I
sucks.
did. I went like it took me a few days, like a little while to be like, what's wrong with me? Like I know I didn't get it
Right.
right the first time, but what's wrong with me? And then, you know,
Yeah.
eventually I was like, yeah, screw this guy.
Yeah. Well, we all, you could think of a lot of cringy moments that you say about somebody that you don't necessarily mean
Right.
or mean the way that you said it, but you don't think they were ever going to hear it or see what you wrote. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah, that's for sure.
we're all a little bit over the top harsh with people, and I'm sure he would be if you had called him out on it, he probably would have been a little bit embarrassed. I'd imagine.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah. Especially because we did get along pretty well. So I think, it's probably just whatever on his point. And, I don't want to say I don't hold grudges because I just said I did. But I mean, at this point, it's all water under the bridge. It's whatever.
Yeah,
I think he just retired, so good for him.
you can forgive.
Yeah, for sure.
Charlie, can you describe a strange or bizarre thing you dealt with on the job?
Man, I was trying to nail down one story because where I worked was a Florida beach town.
I mean,
High
it's Florida,
transient,
so there's got to be a bunch.
right? I mean, Florida man all over the place. Transient population, meth all over the place. So I mean, you just take those together and you kind of just have so I'm trying to think. So one of the stories has to go with that. I think one of them. I mean, all my stories have to deal with like homeless crackheads usually. Um, so this one, like, so we always had events because we were a beach town. We always had events going on, and my unit at the time we were narcotics, but we were also like community policing, which those typically don't usually go one and the other, but we somehow
Interesting
made it work.
combo.
Yeah. And so we were for this event, we were supposed to walk or be on the boardwalk and kind of in the event area, but we were also working cases. Like we were all like working on something, and on the beach was a different police jurisdiction, and it was manned by the county, and they had like the beach was packed that day, and somebody stole this lady's what you call it, stroller, like her baby stroller. Like she went in the sand with her baby, whatever, and then she turned around and her stroller was gone. So like the patrol squad, my squad, we were all on this like all points bulletin bolo for this stroller. And so, we went all over the area, and you would have thought it was the freaking Thomas Crown affair, the way we were interrogating people and like, where's this stroller or whatever. And like, it was just all citizens are important, but it was just a tourist. It wasn't like it was the city manager's stroller or whatever. It was just a
Right.
tourist stroller. And so I think that's how bored we were working the boardwalk detail. So we're like, yeah, let's just go all out with this. So anyway, everyone was out. We couldn't find it. We just kind of wrapped it for the day, and we're getting ready to go home. And as I'm like leaving, or as I'm getting to the station, I see homeless lady with a stroller, exactly as was described. I was like, I think I got it. And like, this is after we gave up on it. Like, oh, whatever. It's only a $200 stroller, whatever.
Right.
Pull up to her, and I'm like, hey, what's up with the stroller? And sure enough, it's the stroller. And I go and I hook her up, and only that up to that point she was normal. Actually, I'm telling this story and I just thought of an even better one. But so she flies off the handle. She's like, "What are you doing? That's for my baby." And then like some other crackhead comes walking by and goes, "Lisa, you ain't got no baby. Shut up." Like just whatever. And like she was carrying on like crazy and just drawing a lot of eyes. And with all the tourists in town, they thought I was like murdering this woman, and I truly wasn't. Like, he's gonna rape me. I'm like, would you stop that? No, I'm not. Like, it was so bad. But so I told that story, and I thought about like the people looking, and that made me think of an even better story. So I'm actually going to retract that one. So me and my buddy had this area in our town. We called it his honey hole. It was like this vacant lot where one day there's going to be probably a 13-story condo building in there or whatever. But it was just this like nice lot, and it went right up to the river. And, we would always find people doing drugs there, having sex. It was a trespass site, so we could arrest just for being there.
Party lot.
And yeah, absolutely. And for the most part, people knew not to bring a lot of people there because we were always there. Well, it was a different kind of event day. I think it was like Memorial Day weekend. And we get a call about people swimming in the river by this location. So me and my buddy go there. Sure enough, 3 kids, probably in their late teens, early 20s. And they're swimming in the river, which is fine, but they can't get out of the river technically because it's trespassing. I was like, hey, you guys got to go. You can't swim here. And so they get out, whatever. And we're going to give them all a break. Like, hey, we got a busy night ahead of us. It's Memorial Day. Y'all have a great day. Got to run your names just because we made contact with you. So they do. They all give us their names. It was two guys, one black guy, one white guy, and one white female. The white girl and the black guy were an item, and then there was the white guy. And we run the names, and the black guy had a warrant out of Jacksonville or whatever. And so we're like, hey man, tough break. You got a warrant. You go to jail. He goes, oh man, I didn't think that was going to happen yet. He was cool about it. He was like, oh, my bad. Whatever, do what you got to do. And so we go to the other two, like, hey, he's got to come with us. You guys got to skedaddle. We'll get you his bond information. He'll give you a call. The female is like, all right, peace, deuces. And she leaves. She starts walking away. And the guy's like, nah, y'all are picking on him because he's the black guy, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, no, dude, I'm picking on him because he's got a warrant. Like, I got, I was like, you got ran too, you're fine. And he goes, nah, he starts calling us cracker and blah, 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 blah. And me and my partner were like, listen, dude, you got to go. Like, you're not in trouble, but you're rapidly approaching trouble. Like, we don't want to arrest you or whatever. And he's like, nah, and he just starts getting, tough or try to be. And out of nowhere, he just whips his dick out. He's like, nah, fuck y'all guys.
What?
And he pulls his dick out. I'm like, what the hell is that? And my buddy runs up and just tackles him. He's done. He has no point. Like, First off, what are you doing with the dick? Secondly, no. So he literally knocked his dick in the dirt. Like, just literally threw him down. And so we arrest him for, now we've got him on trespassing, and we hooked him up for resisting and something else. So the girl comes walking back from the street. She goes, what's going on? And I'm like, your buddy here wanted to be stupid, so he's going to take a ride with us too. So she goes, well, I got nowhere else to go. Arrest me too. And I'm like, that's not how this works. Like, you got to break the law. She's like, well, I'm refusing to leave this lot now. Arrest me. And we're like, fine, fuck it. And so we hook her up too. So we put her in the car, and then it gets crazy. So she was the most compliant of all 3 of them, except for the dude that had the warrant who understood the game. We get her to prisoner transport, and she loses her mind. Like she starts screaming, kicking, fighting. We had to what you call it? We had to, what are they called? Um, not, I keep wanting to say hog tie. That's not it. The
Oh,
the
like four pointer or like
Yeah, like we had to like truly restrain this chick because she was so violent, and we're like, I go to the black dude, her boyfriend. I'm like, dude, what happened? She goes, or he goes, she gets like that. It's whatever. I'm like, you couldn't have warned me, like,
yeah.
but so that was definitely a way better story than
Oh,
the stroller story. But yeah, just I was like, I turned to my buddy who, when we would roll together, we would always find some craziness. I had more uses of forces with this guy than anybody than on my own. And I'm like, only us could turn a simple like, hey, stop swimming in the river, have a nice day, to a 3-person 2 felony arrest. Like, what the hell is this? And then,
yeah.
my sergeant at the time, different sergeant, was like, you guys got to stop rolling together. This is too much. I'm like, we're not trying to find these people.
Yeah, no offense to the ladies out there, but pretty much the worst prisoners I've ever had have been women. There
Oh, yeah.
is there is even like someone like for a simple OUI, it always went off, it goes off the rails when they get into the booking room and then get put in the cell and they see the toilet. And it's like, this is where I have to, that seemed like that's always a thing that would trigger somebody to start freaking out. Like like there's a camera in there. I'm not going to the bathroom in here. Of course they're drunk or high or whatever. And then it would
Always, yeah.
just get crazy. I mean, throwing used tampons against the wall,
Oh,
or
yeah. I was just going to say that. Yeah.
have one lady take the prison blanket and, she was angry. So I didn't think she truly, and she wasn't in her right mind either, but she zipped it around her neck, like, click, and she started turning purple. I looked in on the cell because I'm talking to the sergeant over by the booking area, and I'm like, we had this big brass key to open the doors.
Yeah.
Like, key, because she couldn't get undone. She was legitimately, choking herself out.
Asphyxiating, yeah. So before I was on the road, I had 2 rounds in prisoner transport, and before I had any experience, I was in prisoner transport, and it was some night. I honestly don't remember what it was, but I had picked up this girl from the bar district, and she was like, when I took her from the police car to the transport wagon, she must have been like on MDMA or something, because she was like super flirty and funny. Like, I was like, all right, I can deal with this chick in my car or in my van for for a little while.
Right.
And like the way the van was set up, I don't know if it's every van or whatever, but there was a side compartment that was right up against the driver's head, and then there was 2 compartments in the back, and they were longer, and they would butt up to the middle compartment. So I put her in the middle compartment because I typically put the more combative and annoying ones in the far back. And so I put her in, and she's in like a cocktail dress like you would wear to a nightclub, right? And so she goes in there, she's cool. I'm like, hey, we got to do a couple more pickups. We're going to go right to the jail after that. She's okay with that at that time. And she, as we're driving, I'm watching the camera, and I see her slipping her cuffs. I'm like, hey, what are you doing? And she's like, fuck you, pig. And she starts cursing. I'm like, where did this come from?
Flirting is over.
Yeah. I was like, party time's over, I guess. And she starts like banging the cuff against the wall or whatever. And I'm like, whatever. Like, she's not going to get out, right? And I'm not worried about her breaking the plexiglass. So I'm just like, just stay there, no problem.
Right.
Had to go to the hospital and pick up this other kid that they had cleared from whatever incident he was in, and he was going to get transported to jail. And so I go to the hospital, and this guy's still fighting. I'm like, y'all didn't give him some special K before giving to me? Like, he couldn't, like, get some ketamine, take a ketamine nap?
Chill this guy out.
Right. But no, so he's like, just like, what you were saying about females were absolutely right. Also, the worst fights I've ever had were usually females, but also skinny white dudes. Those are like, they're just squirrely and skinny and scrawny, and you're hard to like. Yeah, and they're like fighting with playing pool with a wet noodle, right? Like, you can't control them. And so I get him in the van, and like I'm patting him down to make sure there's no bulges or whatever, and I get him in. Because I was so new, I didn't think, hey, take his belt off, stupid, because I just wanted to get him in the van, right?
Right.
So officer gives me the arrest paperwork or whatever was needed, and I go, and I'm taken. And like, to leave the hospital, as I'm leaving the hospital, I've got one crazy guy, one crazy girl, the arresting officer for the crazy girl goes, "Hey, I forgot to give you something in our property. Can you meet me at the station?" Which is 10 minutes across a bridge and all this stuff. I'm like, I guess she's kind of fighting. And I was like, I got two combatives in here. And the sergeant was like, no, 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 no. He'll meet you. Go to like somewhere, on your way, and he'll meet you there. I was like, great.
Right.
That works for me. And so I go, we meet. And as he gives me the property, he goes, man, is that them back there? I was like, yeah, they're nuts. And like, she's going crazy. He's going crazy. And I'm on my way. So as I'm driving, and at one point we actually like resecured the female, but she slipped it again. I get so when you get out of my city to go to the jail, there's like a good 10-15 minute drive of nothing. It's just woods and everything. And I'm right at the last traffic light before that. And the guy goes, I'm going to kill myself. And he grabs his belt, puts it around like the padlock where he had where like the divider would be, and he like puts it around his neck. I'm like, oh shit. And like I call on the radio, I'm like, hey, this guy's trying to hang himself, whatever. Cops came out of the trees. I don't even know how that many cops got there that quickly, but they, we yank him out, we throw him to the ground, we take his belt off, whatever, throw him back in there. And then we're like, well, while we're here, let's deal with this female. So we open up and like we've got tasers pointed at her, thinking she's going to use the cuff as a weapon. We secure her again. And like they made it so tight that she could not get it off this time. And so now I go to the jail, and I needed one of the officers to escort me out there because we didn't know what was going to happen next.
Were you alone in this transport the whole time?
Yeah, it was just me by myself.
Oh.
Yeah. So we get to the jail, and then the officer's like, all right, deuces, I don't want to deal with the jail. Bye. And I get in there. Jail staff helps me with the dude. He gets the special chair and all that stuff to get in there.
Yeah.
And then it's like, all right, let's go deal with the female. And I was like, hey, she's just as feisty. Can I get like a female staff member and you guys to come out? So we open it up, and she passed out at this point. And like her cocktail dress was all the way up because of how she was like carrying on or whatever. And the female CO looks at me and goes, you can't bring her here like this. I'm like I freaking did this to her. Like she did it to herself. Yeah. I was like, she did this. And like, they cover her up. They give her a trauma blanket or whatever. I'm like, she's fine. She was cursing me every name, but Jesus earlier. So yeah, and as I'm telling that story, I'm just thinking of all the crazies I had in that van. Like I could probably write a book just on my prisoner transport experience for 1 year.
Oh man, was that like a prisoner transport? Was that like a detail for a shift? Like you're on prisoner transport tonight?
No, so they just, when you were a part-timer, you were like it was their reserve status, and like if you were pre-FTO. Or if you were like, you didn't make FTO, they would just stick you there as just like a body, because our city was so big and so busy. We didn't have time to go to the jail individually, each officer. So we would just carpool with all the prisoners that we would get for like a given hour or two, and then bring them out there. So when I was awaiting FTO, that was what I did. And then after my first round of FTO, I did it again.
Well, I feel like most places in the Northeast, we always have two people to transport a prisoner like that.
Yeah, I wish. And there were times when like, because not only that, but it's also a staffing thing, because I had to call a full timer to help me out with this fighter, or whatever it was. So if I had two in the van, but we never had enough people to have two in the van at a given time. One of the hurricanes, me and my sergeant over at prisoner transport, we rode doubles, because I was like, I even said, I'm like, hey, I'm not driving this van during a hurricane. I'm just not. And he's like, well, we have a prisoner we have to bring to the jail. I'm like, cool, you're driving. I'll help you out, but I'm not driving this van. I don't feel safe with this tall van to bring it anywhere.
Yeah.
So we did that. And then like one time, another different event, we would have like many street festivals or whatever. And this one was huge. This is like a nationally known event. And one of our officers working the walking beat arrested someone. So I pick him up, and like, at this point I'm full time, but because I had experience for this event, they put me as a transport.
Right.
And they're like, hey, this one's easy. He's actually a voluntary, in Florida, we call it a Baker Act, when you're like mentally unstable or whatever, for a 72-hour hold. He's like, this is voluntary. You just got to put him to the front door and let him walk in. He's good to go. I was like, oh, cool. I don't mind being a taxi. This is easy. Take him over the bridge, and this is a busy event, so like lots of traffic. The moment we leave contact with that officer, homeboy in the back of the van hears my police radio go off. He goes, "Stop talking to me." I'm like, "Nah, homie, it's not you. It's the police radio. You're fine." He goes, "No, stop!" And like he starts having this episode, and so he starts, and he's not cuffed because he was voluntary. I was just giving him a
Right.
ride. He starts kicking and fighting and whatever, like donkey kicking the plexiglass behind my head. I'm like, "Are you kidding me?" And then so like I get him to the front door, and I'm like, "Hey," I call the hospital. I'm like, "Hey, hospital staff, can you like help me out with this voluntary?" And they're like, "What? No, like security's not helping you out with a voluntary. That's not." So they're like, "We're not going to accept him like this. You have to Baker Act him, bring him to the other side of the hospital, and bring him in
Right.
that way." I'm like, "Are you kidding me?" And the security guy's like, "No, no, no, I'll meet you over there. It's fine." I'm like, "It's not fine, but okay." So I bring him around. I was there for 5 minutes, probably 10 minutes. Like it was a 2 minute walk, not even from one side of the hospital to the other, but it took security a good 10 minutes to get there with this guy going crazy. Um, I think I finally got him cuffed. It was, and I remember texting that officer. I'm like, "You owe me lunch, probably dinner for the next 2 days. Like your voluntary, no problem, turned into an entire." I think they ended up giving him ketamine. They had to like 3-point restrain him in the hospital bed. He was crazy. I was like, you owe me. You owe me
Yeah,
some stuff.
that sucks. Yeah, where the state I'm in Massachusetts, there's options for taking people. You can take them voluntary, like it's called a Section 12 up here. If they're voluntary, it's not really Section 12, but you can take them to the hospital.
Yeah.
But the agency I was at before I am now never did that. It was always an ambulance. They would call an ambulance. The ambulance would take someone under the auspice that they were requesting help because it's a mental health thing or they're suicidal or whatever. And where I'm at now, we will just throw them in the back of the cruiser and give them a ride with no cuffs and all that. But it's ripe for that type of situation where,
Yeah.
yeah, the person's not stable. So there's a whole
Right.
long ride to the hospital where they can make all kinds of choices or completely change their demeanor,
Yeah. And, talk about training moments. Cause after that, I never let any person in any police vehicle unless they were cuffed. And I had sweet old grandmas I was giving. Well, I think that one was an exception, but like I had people that like definitely did not need cuffs. I was like, "Listen, I'll cuff you in the front," which technically was against policy, but I was like, "I'll do that because you're cool, whatever, but I just don't let anyone in anymore. It has nothing to do with you. Burn me once, shame on me. I'm never going to get burnt again." And, and some people understood, some people were very offended by it. I was like, "You can walk too. Like I'm giving you a courtesy ride. Like, it's different." But, yeah, for sure. Cause you don't know what's going to happen. And that can go with absolutely anybody too. Like, you know, someone you're just trying to help out. And,
Yeah.
little did they know that, or little did you know they were trying to bait you because they wanted to assault you or whatever.
Yeah, I don't let anybody ride behind me without. I take their bags. I put them in the trunk of the hatch of the cruiser. I don't let them have any of their property. I always give them a light pat down, especially because when I was in academy, we had a guy come talk to us, and he had, it was about searching class and all that stuff. And he told us a story that he picked up these two kids that were walking on the road and gave them a ride because it was getting dark. They were like 12 and 13. And when they got to where they were going, he opened the back door. He didn't search them or do anything. He just, two kids, they get out and like a nickel-plated 45 falls out of one of the kids' waistband on the ground. Dang. Loaded, sitting behind them for 15 minutes. And they had just beanied a house where they stole guns. And I was like, but he thought, this is totally safe. It's totally fine. And that kid was a troubled youth and the whole, the kind of kid that would steal someone's nickel-plated 45. And he had 15 minutes to blow that cop's head off if he
right.
chose to.
I said a lot, especially as I got older in my career, and people would I'd be working the street and like a friend of mine would send me a picture of me working that I never saw them or whatever. And I said, after I saw one of these pictures, I was like, the only reason I didn't die today is because someone didn't want to kill me. Like there are so many opportunities for it to happen.
Yeah.
And then like, if I didn't see that person taking a picture, I definitely wouldn't see someone with a gun because they were like far away. They were other side of the street, whatever. And like, same thing in that story, right? The only reason that cop didn't die is because that person didn't want to kill him. Like that, and when you think of officer safety, you have to understand that there's so many opportunities for anybody at any person, not even the person that you are helping out or you are interacting with. Like there's been so many stories, especially over the last like 3 years, of like cops helping change a tire, and then some other motorist comes up and shoots him or something. And it's just, one of the reasons why I made this change to dispatch is like, I don't want to put all that on the line. Like, yeah, I love the job, but all the extra risk and like the craziness, I was like, nah, you know what? I'm good. I been there, done that, have the t-shirt, on to something else. And that was kind of one of the reasons I made a switch.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I see it on even just when people, like when you're a cop and you talk to somebody, you're at an incident or you're kind of investigating maybe a verbal domestic or something, like you want to be personable and you want to ingratiate yourself to them because you can get that relationship and kind of, bring them down a little bit. But you do see guys start getting, one thing I see is like they go from like the bladed interview stance to more of a casual thing. They start pointing and doing stuff, and they'll show them, they'll give their gun to them. And there's one, it's apartment complex or whatever, and there's a lot of people around, and I just see the gun just being offered. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, there's a fine balance between like not being a robotic, like step back, I'm interviewing you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But also you don't want to start like giving it all away, especially we had a guy had all of his stuff up. We have the TAC vests, and he had his baton up there, and I always thought it looked weird. It's like right there. I guess our tasers are up there. It's kind of to me, it's kind of more like you got to protect them a little bit more because it's right there. They can just boop. Mm-hmm. And that happened. This crazy guy, he went to a crash and the guy rolled his car over, and you're thinking like first aid, what happened? Is he, he was just nuts. And the first thing he did was he ran over the cop, and the cop's thinking he's going to ask for help or like say someone's trapped in the car. And he goes, just pulls his baton right off his vest. And it was like, yeah, man, that baton is like right there. If you're going to have it there, it's so easy to let your guard down and not be, because it drives you nuts being on guard all the time. Because when you're off duty, you're looking at people. Everybody is a threat. Everybody wants to kill you. It's drives you nuts.
Yeah, for sure. And when I'm thinking about the baton, of every gadget on the police vest, the baton holster has like the worst retention of all of them. So like to have that up there so easily. Yeah, exactly. And where I worked, we didn't have like the asp. We had something called the Peacekeeper. It looked like a freaking baseball bat. And that one you had to like twist to get it out. So that was like a little bit of extra retention. But I probably shouldn't even said that, but it's fine. I don't think anyone, it's so egregious of a tool, like, because it literally, like, if you hit someone with it, you're going to break a bone. That we were the only agency I ever know to ever carry that. But so just hearing that, I'm like, no. Like I always put my baton like near my gun, so that way if someone was reaching there anyway, that's a bad side. Don't go near there anyway, So
yeah,
that's wild.
We have the option to, because we have so much stuff now. It's like my dad started being a cop in like the late 70s, and he had like a pancake holster and the cuffs and a baton. And then sometimes they'd put the radio on. Like that was it. And now it's like we have the option where we don't have to carry the baton. So I keep mine in my duty bag, basically for like breaking windows and stuff like that. Or you can, if you go to a call that's a fight, you can just kind of get out and put it in your back pocket and just have it. But it's just too many things. It's like, it's ridiculous. You look at the stuff you're carrying. It's like, yeah, it's all good and could be useful, but it's like, it's so annoying to have that much stuff on you.
I remember working that foot patrol detail 1 year that I was talking about. And it was when I was in FTO. That was typically you would put the trainees out there and get them some experience. And we were going to a bar fight, and we grabbed this guy. He's huge. He's probably like 6'5", like big linebacker size guy. And I grabbed one guy's one hand. My partner grabbed another one. The third partner's in front of us. He whips out the baton, and I just remember me like looking over, this giant, Andre the Giant looking fella, his shoulder going, no, don't swing. I was like, don't do it. Because all I could imagine is dude ducking, I get hit in the head, and that would be bad. So I was like, don't do it.
Yeah, split your squash wide open. Yeah,
exactly. And my whole point with that is like, of the duty weapons that are there, the baton is probably the one that I would never, that and pepper spray, I would never use because first off, if you use a baton, the optics look so bad with it. I think Rodney King, that ruined all use of baton ever.
And it causes permanent damage,
Yes. Yeah. And especially the one I had that would literally break bones. It's like, no, I'd much rather tase you or pepper spray you or whatever, but I would never use pepper spray because then you're going to get the responders incapacitated. So I was like, no, let's just not. Taser, hands on, or worst comes to worst, we'll use a firearm. But everything else is like that can not be there at all.
Yeah, I'm always a fan of like if there's more than one of you, just trying to do it hands on. There's no weapons involved. Muckle a guy. I mean, I've never sprayed anybody, believe it or not. 16 years in law enforcement. I've been sprayed by other cops.
Sure, yeah.
I'm a redhead. Like if I could not have that stuff come out of the can, my biggest fear is it's going to get on my eyes and my face is going to swell up.
Sure.
You know what I mean? And yeah, I had a canine guy who was we had a guy like crawl under the crawl space of a house, and we were in like the half basement where we could kind of look up and see what was going on. Freaking canine guy's nuts. He's under there. There's like 2 feet clearance. He's got his dog with him. They're scooting on their side, and the guy's coming around. And I pop up and look, and the stream just goes all over me. I'm like, oh man, this is gonna be.
I'm out.
It was a bad one. Yeah, that's when you go to the person's house and you push them out of the way and like use their sink. Like, I need this. Charlie, can you tell us about your most intense or terrifying call on the job?
So funny you brought up OC because this isn't involved with that. I'm going to tell you 2 stories with this one because one is kind of funny and one is serious. So the funny one, this is when I was working narcotics and we got a call, or we were listening to the radio. We really weren't doing anything that day. Typical detective stuff, and and we heard a call come out that a subject called 911 saying he just shot a bunch of people and he's going to shoot more. And so me and my partner are looking at it and like, that sounds weird. Let's go see what's going on. So we ride over there, and I think we rode separately, and we're getting there, and like the patrol sergeant's like, are there any other calls from the hotel? Oh, it's from a hotel. It's like, any other calls from the hotel? Nothing. No, make contact with hotel staff. They weren't able to do that. So we get to the hotel. It was probably like a group of like 5 of us that got there, and we're like, hey, where does this phone number come back to? And they go, oh, room whatever up on the 6th floor. And we're like, okay, cool. So group of 5 of us ish, let's say 6 because that sounds more accurate. 4 of them are like, all right, well, we're going to take the stairs. And me and my partner are like, to the 6th floor? We're like, we're going to the elevator. So me and him, we go to the elevator, we take it up. We get there before them, of course. And then so you get out of the elevator, and it's like, to your left is a long hallway going like long ways, and then you have another hallway going the opposite way. So they intersect right where the elevator was. So my whole thing is, and we were discussing it going up, like this could be very well an ambush or something like that. So I go out there and I'm like, I'm going to check the T real quick, the top of the T, make sure that he's not like waiting for us to come out of the elevator. So
right.
and he goes towards the room, which was to the right of the elevator. So I go to the left and I clear, everything's fine. And he goes, oh, here it is. And he kicks the door open, which was like kind of ajar. And he's like, he's got a knife. And then like, so I obviously, at this point, my gun's out. I run to him and he's like, relax. It's just a knife. It's just a knife. And he was like a good distance away. He was probably like, think hotel room. He was all the way up against the window away from the door. Guy is butt naked. He's got like all these different knives, like pocket knives, but they're decent sized knives.
Yeah.
And he starts throwing them at us. Well, actually, before even that, he's like, it's a knife. And my buddy, since he made contact, he's like, hey, get your taser out. Let's try tasing him. So I put my gun away. I take out the taser. We got the fancy new, Taser 7s, I think. And like, they're like, the second batch of darts, they go further. You're good. So I shot both of them thinking that they would go without having to worry about him rushing after me with these knives. No, he was too far away. So I was like, I missed. And so I'm out. Right. So we're holding. And now the people that decided to take the stairs are showing up. And so we're all stacked up on this thing. And the guy's throwing knives, hit my buddy in the chest a couple times, but we had tack vest on. So it was fine. It just, bounced off. No problem. And then we're like, all right, like at this point, he's throwing the lamp, a desk, a chair. He's throwing everything at us. And he's like, shoot me. He's wanting suicide by cop at this point. And not very well, because he could have done other things and whatever. Anyway, so my buddy is like, all right, stack up, let's go in. And I'm like, they're all going in, all 5 of them. And I'm like, I'm going to stay out here and radio to dispatch because they have no idea what's going on.
Right.
So like I'm holding hallway cover while they're going in, and I'm telling the sergeants that are responding, like, hey, we've got armed subject, blah, 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 blah. They all go in, and the video actually made it to YouTube, and like they do really good flanking this guy. They got like a nice semicircle on him. They continue to tase him. They shoot, like every one of them was shooting tasers on this guy. The room looked like freaking Spider-Man was in there with all the different like probes going everywhere, but nothing was affecting him. I think some were good hits and a lot of misses. My one buddy was going on the subject's left, and like probably would have been good to like tackle him at this point. But they didn't. They decided to pull out. But while they're pulling out, one guy in this stack goes, I'm going to pepper spray him. I don't know what he was thinking, but he thought pepper spray was a good option at this point. And he does. Now we're in a hotel, and in Florida, especially on the beach side, all hotels have hurricane rated windows. They don't open. So there was just pepper spray in the air of this entire hallway for hours at this point that we were there. So like we got to the point of like, call the hotel staff to open up rooms so we can get more ventilation, whatever. And we did. It was just a mess. And then we were on this door probably for 2 hours or so, maybe more. We had a hostage or one of our negotiators come in, try to talk the guy out. And one of our SWAT guys came in with the 40 mic, and we're like, well, when all else fails, let's just hit him in the chest with one of these. It took 2 to take this guy down. 2 40 mics to the chest, took this guy down. And then we cuffed him up or whatever. He actually got a taser probe in the dick when we finally made contact. So like this guy was feeling no pain, right? And like the Taser 7 hooks are huge. So like good. I mean, whatever he was on something strong. Right. And so we're cuffing him, and like now that he's coming down from whatever he was dealing with, he's feeling the pepper spray, he's feeling the everything. Because also with all the probes in him, like those are open wounds. Yeah. Pepper spray's getting into him and all that. So he's like complaining about all that, and we're like, we get him taken care of, take him to the hospital, and we ended up charging him with like however many knives, that many counts of aggravated battery on law enforcement, whatever. And he tried to claim insanity when it went to trial. That didn't work out for him. And I think he's in prison for many, many years now. But
damn, that's a good one, man. He's lucky you guys didn't poke a few holes in him.
Yeah. I mean, if he were any closer, if he charged at us or whatever, it would have ended that way. But that's why I'm saying, like, if he was trying to do suicide by cop, he did it stupidly. Like, you stood away from us and tried to get us to, blink first, and it didn't work. That call ended up, the video made it to Donut Operator. He did a breakdown of it and a few others.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it was pretty cool, except that Donut Operator talked shit about me. He's like, no way the taser's going to work from that far. I was like, I thought I was closer than I was. Okay. Like,
Monday morning quarterbacking you.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, but that was definitely a hot one. It was we ended up going back to our office, me and my buddy, and we started talking about it. And like to this day, like that's just a fun. It all ended good, so it's a fun story. Like nobody got hurt. Bad guy went to jail, ended up going to prison. Like this is a good story, so it's fun to talk about. And when I think of stories like that, I'm like, man, that's the shit I miss. Like the adrenaline pumping, good teamwork, good communication. Like literally when you talk about stories and like good war stories, those are the ones you want to share because it's like that's good police work right there,
Yeah, they always have a little bit more of a shine to them after you've lived them and you can remember them.
Absolutely, for sure. And like every once in a while, I'll show, I'll talk to my dispatch partners now, and we'll talk about different things. I'm like, back in my day, and it's from 3 years ago, but that's fine. So the other one, a little bit way more serious. I kind of alluded to it in the beginning when my buddy got shot. So it was our first day of work that week. I think it was like a Wednesday night, and he had just come back from vacation. This guy, his name's Jason Rayner. He and I were tight. Like he was a zone partner of mine for a while. I trained him for a day. I was never a full trainer, but like we just always ran together. And he was just big shit magnet, loved getting drugs and guns and stolen stuff. Like he was a true crime fighter. And so there was a bolo put out for a stolen vehicle, and in his zone where he worked, there were just constant shootings in this area, just this one apartment complex. And earlier in the shift, he picked up a found firearm, like a citizen called in, found a firearm, whatever. So later in the shift, I had just arrested a dude for like a drug warrant, not even a drug warrant, like a probation warrant. And so I'm at the station dealing with that guy, and Jason calls out that he doesn't even call out anything. He just puts his call sign out on the air, and I always got on him. I was like, dude, whenever you key up, you cut yourself off. And so I heard it, and it sounded just like normal. Like his call sign ended in 77, and he would always like cut off the end of the 7. And so it didn't register to me as different. But it did to my sergeant. And my sergeant was like, "Hey, where is he? What's he got?" And he wasn't answering the radio at this point. And how many times do we have people on calls? They don't answer the radio because they're too focused on whatever.
All
the
time.
So again,
yeah.
So I'm not. None of this is picking up to me yet. I'm like, oh, whatever. Jason's just doing his thing. And they're like, no, find his AVL, his vehicle locator, and his zone partners start going to him. I'm still doing my paperwork for my arrestee. Now I'm starting to get a little tingly. I'm like, what's going on here? It's different. And the first person on scene, or first two people, was this guy, Pat Erlinson, and my friend Amanda. First on scene, and Pat's like, I need EMS. We've got an officer down.
Ooh.
And sergeant's like, did you just say officer down? He's like, yes, he's shot in the head, and he thought he also was shot in the chest. Ooh. And I just threw shit at the prisoner transport guy, put my car in drive, and just went. And, there was a train of cars behind me with license sirens on. We get there. At this point, Jason's covered with a towel that somehow showed up, whatever. So the story goes, what actually happened was he's investigating this car that's backed into this apartment complex that we had a lot of crime, a lot of shootings recently, a lot of drug activity. All he was doing was getting out with this guy, see what's going on, because backed up, hiding a license plate, all that stuff. And I guess he was also investigating the stolen vehicle thing that I wasn't aware of at the time. And the guy tries to get out of the car. Then Jason tells him to get back in the car. There's a struggle. And ultimately, the guy produced a handgun, shot Jason in the head, and took off. So when we're working this scene, obviously, like in a scene like this, minutes seem like hours. It's crazy how time goes. And we're waiting for the fire department and the ambulance to show up to pick up Jason. And we're like, where the fuck is the fucking ambulance? Like, we are freaking out. They finally show up, because at first we find out that like they didn't know it was an officer down. They thought it was just whatever. Not that makes a difference on response time, but they didn't know that it was an officer down, and which is a different story for a different time, I guess. And they pick him up, whatever. Jason said that it was a white male that did it. So,
so he was still alive at this point?
He was still alive. Yes.
Okay.
So he said, to the responders on scene, the first one's there, white male, and he said other things. I remember white male. So we're scrounging the area for white males. And like, we had K9 teams out, we had tactical teams out searching the area. Two of my partners came across a white dude literally the next street over. And I'm like, fucking got him. And I'm like, I'm running, and we got this guy, and he's cuffed, and I'm like, wait. And so they took Jason's body camera off, and they were uploading it to get a picture of the guy. And I'm like, as soon as they confirm it's this guy, like in my mind, I'm like, my foot is going to be in his face. Like I'm so angry at this point. Like Jason and I were tight. We had music interests. We would go out drinking.
Yeah.
We're tight. So I was like, I'm so angry, and like my emotions were definitely taking over me. And then they're like, hey, check your email for a picture of the subject. We pull it up, and I'm like, here it comes. And it's a totally different guy. It was a black dude, like totally different recollection for Jason, obviously. Right. And so we let the guy go, whatever. And they get a description of the car, everything. We end up getting in a pursuit for the car. And like, my agency had no pursuit policy. The policy was no, and but in this case, it was, everything you need to do. So we don't have like push bars on our car. We have nothing. And we see a car that matches this. Well, I don't. One of our sergeants do. And we're in pursuit of this car. They end up pitting it, which again, we don't have pit policy, anything like that.
Right.
Um, and it ended up not being the car. It was just some juveniles in another stolen car, or whatever. And which I thought about afterwards, like, man, they're so used to us not chasing, and then now we're pitting them. They're probably like, what the fuck is going on here?
Right.
So after that, we all get told to go back to the station. Everyone that's working at this point, every agency in Central Florida is showing up and providing relief. FHP is showing up, and we get like a debrief, and I'm waiting for the worst news, right? Like when we go there, I'm waiting for them to tell me the worst news in the world, and they don't. They're like, hey, Jason's in ICU. We literally know nothing. And then they try to do a CISM meeting, critical incident debrief. Everyone's still in shock of the moment. No one's talking about anything. And then they dismiss us. At first they say, you can go back to work. And so I'm like, all right. You told me to go back to work. I know I have to finish my arrest paperwork, so let me do that first. And then I think I was the first one on our squad to be like, hey, I'm 10-8, send me to whatever. And dispatch sends me to a noise complaint, loud music. And I was like, fuck that. Like, I was so angry. I was like, this just happened. Now I got to go to this. And my sergeant gets on and goes, no, get your ass back to the station. Nobody's going to take calls. Stop. And I was like, okay, cool. Like, I was like, all right. Like, I was going to go back to work because she told me to go back to work, but I didn't want to.
Yeah, not in the right state of mind.
Of course not. And so we get back to the station, and they tell us to go back up to the briefing room. And I'm like, oh, here, like every time they would do this, my heart sank because I thought we were going to get bad news. And it wasn't. It was literally just like, be here, not there. Like, like
right.
That kind of thing. And everyone was just like, no, we either want to go out and find this guy or not be here. And so they dismissed us for the night as soon as relief came in. And again, no one wanted to talk. No one wanted to debrief. But as soon as we got to the parking lot, then everyone was talking. And I was like, y'all couldn't have done this upstairs when people were trying to help, but I understood.
Right.
But I was in such a bad state of mind that like everybody talking was pissing me off. They were like, "Oh, well, I heard this. I'm like, I was so, and I'm not an angry guy. I am like, I'm the meme guy. Like, I'm funny and I like having fun or whatever.
Right.
And I was just so angry by everything. I was like, I got to go home. And my girlfriend was visiting at the time. I was like, I got to go home. And so we get called back in like the next day or two. They end up finding the guy. He fled to Georgia, and he was hiding in like a treehouse for like this black nationalist group.
Really?
Like almost like a Black Panthers too. Yeah. And he was in a treehouse that they owned in their compound, and they arrested him, and they put Jason's cuffs on him. Jason was in the hospital for 55 days. Fighting, and he was showing really good improvement, and then out of nowhere his condition just dropped. And it was my last, so let me just take a quick step before I go there. So that was the June 23rd of 2021, and so I took 2 weeks off to like recover and like get my mind right while Jason's in the hospital. And then I go back to work for 4th of July weekend of that year, which 4th of July was on a Sunday. And then I had this thing with my sister that she always wanted to know when I was home from work, because we didn't live together or whatever. And so, and both my parents were passed. So that was just her thing. Like, she wanted to know I made it home from work. And 4th of July was crazy with the fireworks and the fightings and the shootings and whatever. So when I got home at 4 a.m., I just like sat in front of my TV. I think I like played a video game for a minute. I was like, all right, now I'll text her. And as I'm going to text her, my nephew calls and says that my sister had a sudden asthma attack, which she had asthma her whole life. But he's like, hey, she's in ICU. She's unconscious, blah, blah, blah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So I'm like, okay. I'm like, I need to sleep. Like I can barely keep my eyes open. I'll call you when I wake up. Let's go ahead and, we'll see what's going on there. And in my mind, I'm like, all right, I'm going to go to sleep. I'll wake up at 10 a.m. or whatever, and she's going to be fine. She'll be, she'll get some steroids. She'll be good to go. Because that's whenever she would have an asthma attack, that would be what would happen. I wake up at like 9 or whatever, and they're like, no improvement. So ultimately, she ended up passing away a week later.
Oh my goodness.
She had the asthma attack, and she was basically brain dead from that moment with a collapsed lung and everything. But they tried everything to kind of.
I'm so sorry, man.
Thank you. So now that happened, and I was out for 3 weeks following my sister's passing. I go back to work. Um, Now, somewhere in all of this, I complete my hiring process with the new agency, and so I'm leaving. I'm going to a new place, and my last day on the road at my agency. So I had put in my 2 weeks notice, and I had taken 2 weeks off. So my last day on the road, but I still had 2 weeks to go. We're driving into work, and the sergeant texts and goes, "Hey, everyone meet at one of our precincts. We're doing a two district briefing," which they never did that. And I'm like, okay, that's weird. And we go there, and they go, "Hey, Jason's conditions worsened severely. His family's going to be pulling him off life support," and that's that.
Wow.
And we're like, well, shit, and this is my last day. And they're like, "Listen, we don't expect you to do any work tonight. Like, if you guys want to go be firemen and hang out in the station, we totally get it. But this is that." So I remember I go back to, and then my sergeant, like, trying to, like, lighten the situation a little bit, was like, "Hey, it's this guy's last day, we have cake, whatever." I'm like, like, I hate that my last day is with this, right?
Yeah.
And so I go back to the station, and I remember eating the cake they made for me, like the good luck cake, and watching the Little League World Series. And then I'm like, well, I'm not doing anything today. And I went to my apartment, which was in my beat, and I grabbed my golf club, and there was a golf club or golf course across the street. And I'm like, I'm just going to be pitching for 12 hours. If you guys need anything, I'm going to be working on my pitching. And I ended up going to a call or two just to, like, get out of my headspace. So then I had my 2 weeks off of that, and then but I was working, like, details, because we had another big event going on. I was like, I'm gonna get this overtime money before I leave, because I know I'm not gonna
Sure.
have it when I go anywhere. And I'm trying to think of the time frame. So at one point, something of it, I'm at my family's house for dinner, or I'm gonna be there for dinner, and I'm leaving. I leave to go to my apartment real quick, and I'm gonna come back up. And I was in a good mood for everything that had happened up to that point. I was in a good mood. I don't know why. And I get a call from my sergeant, who was like, "Hey, everyone needs to meet at the hospital in Class A's now." And basically, Jason died that night, and
Hmm.
it was August 17th. And yeah, so that was a 55-day ordeal, and it
Wow.
was to date. There's still nightmares and dreams that I have of, like, that night, and just the craziest
I
stuff.
bet,
And,
man.
like, the camaraderie, it's weird, because so since that, and I mentioned it in the beginning, but, like, the first responder on scene, Pat Erlinson, he ended up taking his life from it. He had PTSD from it and other things. And from all that stuff, it kind of, like, changed my outlook on everything.
Yeah.
I really got big into mental health and taking care of each other and things like that. And I ended up, aside from leaving the road and going to dispatch, I went back to school, and I'm in school now for psychology. And,
That's
I
great.
learned so much. Thank you. And I learned so much from it, kind of in bad ways. Like, I learned, like, this is what debriefings shouldn't be. This is what peer support shouldn't be. And so now, like, yeah, I make the memes and everything, but my biggest thing in life is, like, to make sure that cops don't die, and, like, definitely not by their own hand. And how can we support each other and everything? Because I think about, like, yeah, my squad got close, but so much of it was just trauma bonding, and, like, hey,
Right.
and Stockholm syndrome, like, hey, we were in this really bad thing together, so let's get close. And it's gotten better, for sure. It's been 2 years. We've all kind of seen therapists and whatever, and we're doing much better. But it's still a very, very tough thing to live through, for sure.
Man, that is such an intense, harrowing story, man. Thank you for sharing it, Charlie. That is
Yeah.
so tragic, and thank goodness you were able to you were able to have that. You're cognizant of what you needed, and it kind of put you in a direction for healing and all that stuff. Have you talked to Michael Sergiu before?
Yes. Yeah. Actually, he was on my show.
Okay, yeah, because he's been on this one too, and he has I think he's made it like his life's mission to really address all the terrible things that cops go through, and how so many cops just don't deal with it the right way. You know what I mean?
Right. And, the thing with everything, like, Jason's passing was absolutely tragic. And, like, I've gotten very close with his family, his sister. But Pat's took me even harder, because, like, I was never expecting that. Like, Pat was just this funny guy, good guy, like, smart ass, typical cop. Like
Right.
anybody who knows like a tough cop, and like he and I only worked a little bit together, but when I went to his funeral and I went to heard his parents' eulogy for him, I was like, shit, man, he was so much like me that it upset me more.
It's scary
And
because you think could I go down that road?
absolutely. So and like he and I before that would make jokes, right? And like cops have very dark sense of humor. And we would make jokes
Sure.
about suicide, and like I didn't think anything of it. I was like, oh, this is just a joke. It's not going to go anywhere. And then it happens, and I'm like, whoa, this is not. And I'm writing a thing now for a different organization, and the story I'm going to tell is a call I responded to when a neighboring agency sergeant killed herself on our beach. And like that night, that was like 2019, I think. That night really was like an eye opener, because you hear about it on the news and you hear about it on all the different police websites and everything, like, oh, cops take their lives, whatever, but you never expect it to be in your backyard, and you
Right.
really never expect for it to be in your house. And we all have this like illusion of invulnerability, like that's not going to happen to me. And to have two tragic incidents happen so closely together, I was like, man, but we've got to figure out ways that this doesn't happen. And when I moved to my new agency, we had a detective take his life. And I'm like, this is so terrible. And like, we need to do so much more. And because of my interest in this now, finding out that cops take their lives 4 times more than bad guys do, or than car accidents take us. And that's not good. Like we are literally our own worst enemies. And you look at everything that comes with this job, and we're so underserved, and we underserve ourselves in the world of mental health, and we eat our own. And I think like all that stuff needs to be fixed, and it takes a village, obviously, but it definitely changed my path immensely, to the point of like, yeah, I like making people laugh, but I want them to be alive now.
Yeah, man. You went that. I mean, you were exposed to some serious trauma. I can imagine finishing out a career on patrol after going through something like that. That's crazy, man. We had the same with us. We had a same as the detective you mentioned. We had a detective leave and go down to the beach down the road from the station and shoot himself, and it was like you said, like when you know the person and you're friends with them, it's like, oh my gosh, this is it really. And I didn't even respond to that when I wasn't working, but they just called and said full department recall, and we're like, what the heck's going on?
Yeah.
That is crazy, because you look back at it and you're like, nobody knew it was that bad. And like, what could have I done, or should someone have done something? Or
Right.
I remember sitting in his office and he was dealing with a suicide, like we had been to one, and he was doing the report, and him being like, man, why do these people kill themselves all these different ways? He's like, they're aware of the gun, right? Just shoot yourself. It's like painless. Why would you like? I think
Right.
this one
Right.
guy built this. He like lit a charcoal grill inside his bedroom and then just lied on his bed, and the charcoal,
Yeah.
having the
Carbon
fire in the
monoxide.
bedroom. Yeah, he just died like that. But it was like, that seems
A little
like,
extravagant.
yeah, yeah. And his point was like, you should just. I'll never forget him saying that. You should just shoot yourself in the head. And we all laughed, like
Right. Right.
that
In the
gallows
moment.
humor. And then he did that. It was like, oh my gosh, was he thinking about it then? This
Right.
seemed
Yeah.
crazy.
And like, unfortunately, there's a lot of survivor's guilt with stuff like that. And the sergeant that had us do the debriefing, and she's heard different interviews I've done before, and she always thinks I'm like calling her out, and I not at all. She's currently, so she was a police sergeant here in Florida. She actually retired, went out to Montana, and she's a police officer out there now, but she's also their social worker. So she has like um, she has training and schooling. She's going for a master's in psychology. And so she always thinks I'm saying like, "Oh, you didn't do enough." I'm like, "No, none of us would have known to do more or whatever." And that's the problem, is like you always kind of like look at him like, "Oh, what could I have done? What should I have done?" And it's unfortunately so many times it's the ones you don't expect. And that's like a lot of the Instagram pages I follow now have to do with mental health, and one of them, they're like, this is what a suicidal person looks like, and you see like Robin Williams, or you see like someone smiling and happy, like, and
Right.
unfortunately that's true. Like, you don't know. And so, like, one of the things that I always talk about is like getting therapy, and people hear that word and they get so scared of it, but like getting it before you need it. Like, when we think about police work, we're all about being proactive, right? Let's go catch something before a crime happens. Same thing with your mental health. You have to be proactive with it, and like, so that way you have the tools when you need it.
Right.
When that whole, like, in case of emergency, break glass, you need to have that installed before the emergency, otherwise there's no glass to break to get it.
Yeah. It can't be
And
a glass of whiskey. This will fix it.
correct, yeah. And so, it sucks, when you look at, because I've lost a couple different people to suicide, some that I knew directly, like Pat, and some that I knew indirectly. There was a detective at a different agency that took his life on Christmas one year, and like, they're all the smiling ones. They're all the ones that joke. They're the life of the party, so to speak. And it's just like, good Lord, it's never, because when we think depression, we think Eeyore, and we think of like super sad. And unfortunately, the ones that need the help the most are the ones that are really good at hiding it.
Yeah. It is weird, isn't it? Where it's like every place has those mental health problem people that are like always trying to kill themselves, or they're suicidal today, or they've taken pills, and they never kill themselves. It's like you're always dealing with this person at the bridge who's going to jump, and it's like they never do it. But with a cop, they just get it done. Like they do
Correct.
it, and it's
Correct.
it's too late. It's like, whoa. But then the people, you see all the other people that are like an annoyance to the police department, constantly threatening to do it, and they just do that for years. I mean, decades they'll go on just being a
Yeah.
problem, and they never do it. So yeah, it's super frustrating, man. Like I said, Charlie, thank you for sharing all that, man. That is a really crazy and sad story, man. Especially, I can't believe your sister passed during that whole thing, man.
Yeah. And then I mean, to make matters worse, I guess there was another death during all that. We had one of my former FTOs actually passed from COVID during all that, and he and I were not very close. And I feel bad that he's like in that mix, because so much was going on, that, I don't want to say his death was overlooked, because it definitely wasn't. But I just, that didn't affect me so one on one with everything. But it's just that from June to October is when this all happened, and it's just like those 4 months were so terrible, and it was like, and now, like, 2 years later, I look at everything going, shit, like, here's another anniversary, and
Right.
it's tough.
And that all that stuff happened to you with the national kind of feeling towards cops, being like cops are no good and we should get rid of them. So it's like
Yeah.
this whole thing's happening and people are calling you a dirtbag. It's
Correct.
like,
And this guy that shot Jason, who, I think they started the trial. I might be wrong with that, but anyway, um, he had this nationalist support or whatever going on. So um, I would read like the news articles, and then I would read the comments, which comments are cancer, and they would all be like against the police, and I'm just like, I can't, like, I'm getting brain cancer just reading this crap. And but it's bad, and you're like, shit. And to be fair, that's one of the things that when I was ready to leave, like the night Jason got shot, I called my sister and said, hey, I think I'm done. I don't think I want to do this anymore. And eventually I kept going on for a few more months. But when I finally was hanging it up for good, that was one of the things. I was like, people don't appreciate what we do. Obviously, now I can say that many, the greater majority appreciate what we do.
right,
But I, at the time, I was like, I can't justify risking my life, the future of me, my family, whatever it might be, for people that don't care, and
right,
which is the cornerstone of police work, right? Like, it is literally doing stuff for people that don't know you and don't care. And I was like, well, if that's gone, I can't do this anymore. Because I remember I was going into um, active shooter training, and like, which is like, that is the Super Bowl of police work. Like, that's the time you need to be on your game and everything. And I
right.
just couldn't get up not even courage, the care, the give a shits to go through this training. I was like, I don't want to get shot. I don't want to get shot, period. And that was it. I was like, as soon as that changed, like that logic changed to me, I was like, because no cop wants to get shot, right?
Right.
But it kept me from wanting to go into that situation. I was like, eh. And obviously it's been 2 years. I've had a lot of time to like really unbox stuff and really handle all this and figure out where my mind is and was. But yeah, it's just, and there's times like I've had field trainers come up to me and like, hey, you wanna suit back up? You wanna go? Like we're short. You wanna go out? And I'm like, no, I really don't.
Yeah.
I appreciate it, but dispatch is a pain in the ass sometimes. But I don't want to be on the road either. And there's times, when I get a call, it's like, man, I would handle that, or I get angry because my cops aren't doing enough traffic stops. I'm like, oh man, you guys are lazy. And I'm like, you know what?
Yeah.
Aside from those little like flickers of like back in my day, I'm good.
Right.
I have the stories, I have the experiences, have a few YouTube videos out there. It's good enough for me.
Yeah. You're like, hey, let me get a relaxing career and go right into the pressure cooker of being a dispatcher.
Right. And that's funny because people say that they're like, you're dealing with all this PTSD and the shit that just happened, and you chose dispatch. I was like, but it's so much different. I've had a few calls in dispatch where my blood got up. I had one where guy called and said he just shot his wife and he was going to kill himself, and like that got me like hand shaking and stuff.
Sure.
Because you feel helpless. Like I can't do anything but hope my words work. That ended up being a swatting call that wasn't even legitimate.
Oh, I hate those.
Oh, they're terrible. But only a few times have I been like, damn, I wish I was there. Or like you hear one of your guys stops responding to radio checks, you're doing a status check and they don't. And then, so my mind goes back to Jason and my blood pressure goes up and they're fine. They just turn their radio down. I was like, would they stop doing that? Like, I like, or like our guys have this crazy thing that like, they don't call out a traffic stop until they've already made contact with the driver. And I'm like,
right.
That's so unsafe, and like
right.
I said earlier, I was like, I don't like when they do silent things like that because it's like, no, that's when the worst things happen. Or like when you go back to the car, that's typically when shots are fired and stuff like that. And when they think that you found out about the robbery they just did or whatever. But I did a ride along with one of my officers when I was in training, and he did a traffic stop, and I was like, and this guy had experience in Miami. So I thought, man, he's got to be squared away. And it was the most tactically unsafe traffic stop I've ever seen. I'm like, good Lord, what are we doing here? But, unfortunately you can't save the world, but you got to just operate in the space in which you live. And that's kind of where I'm just like, I'll focus on the little four walls in front of me and we'll call it a day.
Yeah, absolutely. Charlie, I've had you on here almost an hour and a half. I appreciate your time. I have one more question for you,
Sure.
and I'd be interested in your answer. So a lot of people listening to the show are on the fence of being cops, or they're in backgrounds, or they're kind of learning if they want to do the job. So they kind of use the show for that.
Yeah.
What advice would you have for potential candidates for police work?
The job is great, but you need to understand that the job will never love you as much as you love it. In my darkest hours, I said it was the most abusive relationship I've ever been in because it's so one-sided, right? You need to understand that the police organization, wherever you choose to go, is a machine. So it needs to keep going. So, a lot of cops get angry. They're like, oh, if I died, they're going to replace me the next day. Or, they're going to have someone sitting when I see the next day. First off, I can tell you that's not exactly true. With Jason, they retired his call sign. They retired his police car. His police car's in the police museum in Titusville, Florida now. So that's not entirely
Very
true.
cool.
But it is very cool. But you do need to understand that it is an organization. It does need to keep moving. So there's that. Your family is never going to say, when you are in your casket at your funeral, your family is never going to say, I'm so glad he took all this overtime. I'm so glad he didn't miss, a day at work. They're going to say, I'm so glad we had these memories together. I'm so glad we went on vacation. I'm so glad we did this. And that's the most important part. You're going to have maybe, if you work a full career, 5 people at your funeral, about that are going to be like, man, he was a great guy. She was a great woman, stuff like that. But the people that matter are going to be the other people, your family, the friends you had outside of the job. When I left my one agency to go to the other, it was such an eye opener that we're friends from convenience because we were there, and the trauma bonding and stuff like that.
Sure.
But they're not there. There's a few friends in there, but so many of them are just coworkers, and you need to remember that because you're gonna feel like you're brothers and sisters, but it's not always that case. So my biggest thing is to understand that it is a job. It takes a very special person to be in this career, and that makes it a calling, right? Because not everybody can do this. Anybody can go work at 7-Eleven. Select people can be police officers, firefighters, and so on. That makes it a calling, but it is a job. So remember that, and that, take care of yourself first, take care of your family after that, and then worry about the job, because that should be your hierarchy of needs. Absolutely.
Words of wisdom. Excellent. Tell us about, before we get out of here, tell us about the podcast in the meme page. How'd you get so many followers, man?
A lot of time and effort and networking like you and I are doing right now. So I started the page in 2019 out of complete boredom. I got in this new apartment. I didn't have a computer or anything. I just had my phone, and I was making memes for my squad mates, and like it started in the academy or whatever, and they loved them. And one time I made a meme, and it somehow got in the hands of one of these police influencers and went viral. It went like, a couple 100,000 views and likes or whatever. It's like,
nice.
No credit for me. I was like, oh God. So I messaged the guy. It was Officer Baker.
Yep.
I'm sure you've heard of him. And I was like, hey, just letting you know, I made that meme. And he goes, well, that's cool. That was it. And I was like, okay.
Thank you.
I was like, I need to do something more with that. So I made the page just in case people saw that meme and it could come back to me. And I just started posting and sharing. And what really lit the fire for me was there was this guy from California who I still talk to this day. And he was like, hey, the stuff he was a sergeant, I believe, at the time. He was like, hey, the stuff you share really resonates with me. And I was like, it does? I was like, there's the issues in California are the same as the ones in Florida. That's wild. Because at that point I was just making memes for me and the people I worked with. And he was like, yeah, man, they're great. So I kept making more and, networking and all that stuff. And then about a year later, maybe like 6 months into it, I was like, because I was using the story aspect of Instagram to like give more of my personal takes on things and not just like, just the humor. And people seem to give a shit. So I was like, what kind of platform can I get on where I can talk more and whatever? And so I never wanted to show my face for anonymity reasons. So I was like, let me do a podcast, which I was on podcasts a couple times as the meme page. And I was like, all right, yeah, I guess we'll try it out. And so I did. And the podcast originally was just like, let's get to know cops. And I really wanted to get popular cops and like show them, their human side. So I had like Deputy Hookham, Officer Smith, Grady Judd, and that stuff was really cool. Now, since experiencing everything that I went through, it's become still that I still have, kind of people with names on them that are pretty cool, but I really focus on well-being, mental health, personal growth, sprinkled in with cops, right? Or with like cop content.
Sure.
And so, I've done 3 full years. I'm about to start season 4 on October 8th. That's 10/8 day for me. So I start everything back up that time.
Right.
So I've already got a bunch of episodes recorded for season 4. The first one is going to be on October 8th, and it's going to be Dr. John Deloney. He works with Ramsey Solutions, who Dave Ramsey is a big financial guru.
He's
so
great.
he works with him. He does a mental health show, and he's written a bunch of books about anxiety and stress and things like that. So he's going to be on. I've got a bunch of other people coming on from all different walks of life, law enforcement, outside of law enforcement. A lot of former law enforcement I've noticed are making the transition to like public speaking and stuff. So I've been doing that.
Oh yeah,
a lot.
But retired guys are the best because they say whatever they want.
Absolutely. And I noticed that when I made from the road to dispatch, I felt so much free in that point.
Sure.
That, that when I finally get my degree and can move on from law enforcement for good, I can't believe, what's going to come out at that point. But so that's it. I'm on everywhere. The podcast is everywhere. Podcast stream. So Spotify, Apple, all that stuff. The Instagram is 10/8_memes, all spelt out. And then I have merch. I just started a Patreon like 4 days ago, so we'll see how that
nice.
goes. Yeah, so because we were talking before we press record, like it's I fall victim to Instagram's algorithms, and it pisses me off every single day.
Yeah.
So I was like, let me try to funnel the people that really want to support me, and they will get 100% of my content for $5. Like, I'll give them everything I post right now for $5, and then everything beyond that is just a little bit. I'll give you extra stuff.
Very cool.
I'm just so frustrated on Instagram that I just need to move on from that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll link whatever you want me to in the show notes. Definitely, at least the Instagram page. I'll link to the podcast, and if you want your Patreon on there, I can link that as well. Honored to have you on, Charlie. Incredible stories, incredible career path you've been on, man. Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely, man. I really appreciate it, and I appreciate what you're doing for people in the job and coming on to the job too.
Oh, thanks, man. Hey, I'm going to do the outro. Can you hang on for just 2 or 3 minutes?
Yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic. The great Charlie from 10/8 Memes, man. Go check them out because has some of the best police memes out there. They're friggin' hilarious. And check out the podcast as well. Like I said, I will link all that stuff in the show notes so you can get there easily. This is the time of the show where we thank the Patreon sergeants. Who I'm talking about is the great Andy Vings, Greg Gadboy, Adam Mehall, the great Chris June, Gary Steiner, Jake Pinedo, the great John Shoemaker, Lauren Stimson, the handsome Lane Campbell, everybody, Seth Wright, the great Tony Fahey, Ben Peters, Braden Walker, Jason Lau, the great Mike Wynn, Sasha McNabb, Scott Minkler, the great Tammy Walsh, holding it down at dispatch, Sean Clifford, Dennis Carrasquillo, Iceman from Motor Cop Chronicles, check him out, the great George Tessier, see you at church, brother, Nick Noose, Scott Young, the great Tom Connell, Wayne M. Miller, retired ATF and author, check him out, Dan Carlson from Burley Boards, doing incredible things with wood, Doug and Kelly Newman, love you guys, see you at church, Joe DeFries, the great Dave Ellman, Elliot Sykes, Richard Tolles, keep on trucking, my man, Christian, Jace Crow, Brad Thompson, Kyle Roberts, Nancy Hammond, ladies and gentlemen, Zach Haney, and the great Clark Laukov. I think I said that right. Clark, let me know, my man. Guys, thank you for all the support on Patreon. Keeps the boat afloat, and I truly appreciate it. Yeah. So if you really love it, it's in the show notes. I'll see you guys next week.